Hi, my name's Kathryn from CrimePsych, and I'm going to be doing a series of videos looking at criminal psychology and forensic and investigative psychology. But before I did that, I thought it would be useful to introduce myself and just to tell you a little bit about myself. I've not always been a criminal psychologist, but I have always had an interest in crime and offending and why people do the things that they do. I always used to watch the fictional TV programs on profiling. I used to love to watch Cracker, CSI, Silence of the Lambs, NCIS, all of those types of fictional programs. And of course, Silence of the Lambs. I loved that film. Um, and of course, I would always watch the true crime documentaries as well. And I would often wonder to myself if it was actually possible to get into the mind of an offender, to tell something about an offender based on what they'd done. And while I was watching these true crime documentaries, I'd watch experts give their analysis of some famous serial offenders. And I would always have more questions than what those programs answered. I would often wonder not just why they did what they did, but what makes these people different from the rest of us. What drives people to offend and carry out some of the actions the way that they did. And I was fortunate enough to be able to become a mature student. So I went to college and I went to university to study offender psychology. And I was a tiny bit disappointed to learn that you couldn't immediately tell everything about an offender based on the crime scene or the crime that they'd committed. But what I did find out was so much more interesting. When I went to university, I knew that the university I was going to worked Professor David Cantor. I'd always had a passion for learning. When I started university, I chose the university in which Professor David Cantor taught. Now, I'd seen Professor David Cantor on these true crime documentaries, and I'd already read a couple of his books by that time. And I knew that he was one of the world leaders in criminal psychology, and I was determined to get involved with his work. So, fortunately, he took me on. I approached him and asked could I be an intern and work as a research assistant for him, and I started to work alongside with him. And because it was such a big department, a high profile department, it was very much a sink or swim situation for a newish student. Fortunately, I swam after a bit of flailing around for a bit. But I learned a lot very fast. And one of my first assignments with Professor Cantor was to go out into the general public and interview people about their life stories, which I found absolutely fascinating. I got to ask, what were the significant moments in their lives? What roles did they see themselves playing? What was important to them? And that piece of research led me to be able to go into a major prison in northwest England and interview prisoners and ask them similar sorts of questions. So I got to ask them not only about their lives and their significant events and who was important to them and things like that, but I got to ask them about the offences that they'd committed. And I got to interview a lot of different offenders who'd committed a range of different crimes, such as murder, rape, burglary, fraudsters, drug dealers, a whole range of offences, which I found absolutely fascinating. I swear at one point I asked to be called Clarice Starling. I never freaking. Um, but um, what did surprise me about that range of interviews that I did was just how normal these offenders seemed to be. They came across as just nice guys, as somebody's dad, as somebody's husband, somebody's son. And while they were talking about their lives, they were really quite normal. There was nothing exceptional or worrying about their life story that would make you think that they'd go on to commit such horrific crimes for some of them. And so that drove me to go on to do further research, go on to do a PhD and investigate and find out more about offenders and why they behave in the ways in which they do. And that now has led me to set up CrimePsych because I know a lot of you have got similar questions. What makes people offend and do things, in the way that they do? Perhaps sometimes people would commit quite violent crimes of which some of us would never even consider. And what makes these people different, to the rest of us? So I wanted to share my knowledge with you and make it accessible. Not everybody wants to go to university and study this subject in depth, but I want to encourage people to ask questions and to go and seek out the answers. And for every crime, I acknowledge that there is a victim. So, because of that, I will never dramatise or glamorise offending in any way. Everything that I do, all the work that I'm involved with, is based on facts, it's based on research and knowledge, and it's aimed at improving people's understanding of the subject and of offending. So if you've enjoyed this video, you can like it, you can subscribe if you want to know more about various aspects of criminal and investigative psychology. You can even go over to the website and be asked to add it to the mailing list, and then we'll notify you of newsletters, blogs and vlogs which are coming out. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. I look forward to taking you on the rest of the journey soon. Thanks for watching.